Welcome back to the Mainly Hoops podcast. We were just talking, it's been 4 weeks now since the national championship game. Now diving in, as some of you have seen, I'm sure we've had some offseason content, transfer grades. Now diving back in to some podcasts. We're probably going to roll one out once every couple of weeks, maybe throughout the summer, kind of the dead period. But of course, still a lot of news to catch up on. That many of you won't really get caught up on probably until the season gets ready to start. But for those that are interested in it, we're going to be diving right into transfer grades, coaching changes, as we're going to talk about today. A lot of changes around the country, but a lot of exciting stuff that's happened throughout the offseason so far.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the more eventful off seasons, probably. And it's only probably going to get crazier until any sort of these NIL regulations kind of get sorted out. I don't really know what's going to happen there, but until then, every college basketball offseason, college football as well, it's going to be extremely chaotic. And, I think we're going to do our best to try to keep you guys caught up with it. And, right now we're working through some transfer grades and stuff like that. Obviously, we're not going to get through all of them. There's over 2,000 players in the portal right now. You're going to try to familiarize everyone with, the lower major transfers moving up to the power conference ranks. It's a little bit harder to do power conference to power conference, but we're going to work through, we're going to familiarize ourselves with these players as you guys are as well. So yeah, we're going to talk about some coaching stuff today. So definitely excited to get everyone caught up.
Yeah, for sure. And some other things that we wanted to just kind of highlight here in our first episode back of the off season are some of our off season plans. We're going to be, as I said, doing an episode every 1 or 2 weeks. We're going to be trying to do some shorter episodes as well about some of the bigger transfers that some of you may have seen out there. Probably about the top 20. We'll be doing some individual 5 to 10 minute videos, similar to how we did the game previews in the tournament. We're also going to be starting to introduce some reels, some shorts, maybe a TikTok as well to get some more engagement on those platforms in more short bursts. And we might also be adding on the occasion an in-host or an in-episode host here. So Cody and I will be the ones doing all the talking, and then our host will be kind of running the show, directing the conversation. So looking forward to potentially adding some of that, as well as some other stuff that will keep you guys caught up on as we do roll it out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Mainly Hoops is expanding. Obviously, we're excited about it, excited to bring some new content. But yeah, I mean, I guess get into the coaching changes stuff. And yeah, we'll try to keep you guys as entertained as possible throughout the offseason for like the hardcore fans like us, throughout this period of the year where college basketball isn't really thought about all that much. And like the May to, August, September range, we're going to try to throw out some good content for you guys every day. It's not going to be in video form every day. We'll be active on Twitter, making posts every day or two, talking about at least some transfers and stuff like that. And we'll be, rolling out team previews. That'll be a little bit later on. Usually I start diving into my team previews July, like early July, August, and we'll have some content then as well.
Yeah. We're also going to, I think, spend a little bit more time on the mid-majors this offseason as well. We'll show them some more love, do a top 25 sort of countdown thing. We're not sure exactly how we're going to set that up yet. We're going to roll that out before this season, as well as our top 25, for the AP poll, or not necessarily the AP poll, but our top 25 teams in the country. We're going to do a countdown for that as well leading up to the season. So a lot to look forward to. A lot of good stuff, as Cody said, Mainly Hoops expanding. So exciting stuff. But I'm going to jump right in now. Coaching changes, as I said earlier, a lot of changes this year. A lot of high-profile coaches making some pretty surprising changes. Some of them were kind of rumored as the season went along. There were a couple that were pretty surprising. Didn't really understand, but They were done nonetheless. But we are going to start here. First one, Will Wade. He actually made the change, accepted the job at NC State before his team even played Clemson in the first round of the tournament, which was pretty unprecedented. I feel like you don't really see that. Day before he commits to the NC State job, leaving McNeese, but still ended up winning a game there. And NC State's had a pretty loud offseason. They tried to pull Isaiah Evans away from Duke, weren't able to do that. But sounds like PJ Haggerty may be going there. Sounds like they're the favorite, but they've also made plenty of other moves as well to hopefully get the Wolfpack back to relevance after that kind of like 1 year spurt where they went to the Final Four.
For sure. And, we all knew Will Wade was a power conference level coach and one of the better ones in the entire country. It was just all the recruiting violations at LSU that, kind of kept him out of college basketball for a couple of years before going to McNeese and just dominating the Southland. But, it's obviously a great hire. Just he's a fantastic coach. He's a defense oriented coach. He loves to recruit, athleticism across the board. And, he's kind of done that so far with, we got Trey Holloman from Michigan State, a lankier, 1 or 2 guard. And he brought Allen Breed with him, Kadir Copeland as well. And I mean, Terrence Arsenault is a really good pickup. I think he's a really good system fit, especially for the defense. So, and the fact that he's probably going to end up with Haggerty for, what is he going to get, $3.5 to $4 million, which is pretty crazy. We're going to hear about that every single year. But, I think he's done a pretty good job so far in the portal in year one. And, he's been pretty bold, at his opening press conference, basically guaranteeing NC State getting into the NCAA tournament and being in the top 5 or top 3 of the ACC in general. I don't know how hard that is to do, and with the state of the ACC at this point, but he's always been bold. He's always been fiery on the sidelines, and I think the Wolfpack are really going to like this guy.
Yeah, I agree. Should be good for the ACC in general. I think getting NC State back to some sort of consistent relevance will be good, especially for that sort of rivalry between UNC and Duke. I think that'll be good for the area. Next school, we got Richard Pitino making the change. New Mexico going over to Xavier, replacing Sean Miller, who we'll talk about here in a minute. But if you heard Pitino talk at all about, his plans to leave New Mexico, like every time he got an offer or some sort of inquiry, he would always call his dad, and it sounded like his dad was like, not worth it, stay where you're at. But when Xavier called, this was one where he's like, you need to go. This is the one. And funny enough, now they're going to be coaching against each other in conference. They'll be playing each other twice a year, which will be pretty cool.
Yeah, it's going to be super entertaining. And like, I completely agree with his dad for, being the way he was throughout that process. I mean, New Mexico is a really good job. I don't think a lot of people really look at it. A Mountain West school that's not San Diego State. I think a lot of people look at those jobs as not being as great as like a lower level, power conference school, but it absolutely is. And it's been a really good program for a long time. So yeah, it made a ton of sense for him to wait it out and pick the right school. And I think Xavier, obviously a historic brand, and just they've been really good throughout the last few years as well. And with what Sean Miller's done there, he's done a great job. So I think Pitino can, hold up overall. So yeah, I do think it's a good hire. He's done a decent job in the portal. He likes to accumulate as much talent as possible and then just kind of make it work out throughout the season. And I think he's done that with some guys here. Malik Moore from Montana. Haven't really talked about him all that much. He had a really good year in the league. Yeah,
Big Sky, right?
Yeah, the Big Sky. Yep. All right from Valparaiso as well. He loves to have guard talent throughout his roster and then athletic bigs up front. So he's accomplished, his style and the type of roster build that he wants. It's just a matter of them competing early on. And in year one, it's always going to be difficult to do, but I think they're a step in the right direction so far.
Yeah, no, definitely. It'd be good to, I know Xavier won against Texas in the first four. It'd be good to see them get back to being, a great team. I mean, what were they? They were 1 seed or 2 seed, not too long ago. So it'd be good to see them back and get the Big East back, super, super competitive in league. Um, you know, last few years it's been very top heavy, so it'd be good to get them back. Um, next, uh, next coach Ben McCollum, going from Drake to Iowa. He's had quite a whirlwind of basically like 14 months, right? He left D2 to go to Drake, and then within that next year has a great year at Drake, goes to Iowa, and Iowa's had a great offseason so far.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa was they're probably the winner of the offseason, at least within the coaching carousel. I mean, Ben McCollum has to be I think he has to be the top hire and throughout this process. Just seeing how much he's won throughout his entire career. At Northwest Missouri State, how many he won 3 or 4 national championships at the D2 level. Just he's won everywhere he's gone. And I mean, his coaching performance at Drake last season was easily the most impressive across the entire country. I still don't think he gets enough credit for how good they were. They won. I think they only lost 4 games all season long, and to end up having 30 plus wins in year one, bringing 4 or 5 players from D2, and I think 4 of them were, or 3 or 4 of them were starting, and just being able to elevate that team and running through the Missouri Valley like they did was super impressive. And he brought a couple of those guys with him as well. Actually, he brought 5. He brought 5 guys with him, including Bennett Sturts, who's maybe one of the best guards in the entire country. Cam Manyow, who's an elite offensive rebounder. Isaiah Howard, Tavion Banks, Cale Combs. He's brought all those guys with him, and they know the system. And I think it's extremely important for Ben McCollum for these guys to know that system. It's definitely it's a kind of a difficult style to play with how slow they play, at least, and how defensively oriented they are. So to have those guys to maintain that continuity is really important. And then obviously adding the shooting around those guys and Brendan Hawson, who can play kind of that Mitch Muscari role from last season. He's probably a more talented shooter than Muscari. And then adding Alvaro Folgaris from Robert Morris, he was the Horizon Player of the Year, and he's got all the talent in the world at the 4 position. So I think he's done a pretty good job with the NIL budget that he has, and he's done a really good job building this roster too.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see, over the next few years how well he does in recruiting guys to Iowa. I being a guy that was in D2 just 14 months ago or whatever it was, how quickly can he recruit guys to the Power 5 level, and what type of guys can he get there? So, I think that what's going to win him over is probably his ability to be as successful as he is as a coach. If he proves to be successful again this year, it'll be much easier to recruit there, obviously, because guys want to win. So, but you also need the NIL backing, which I don't know exactly what that looks like at Iowa, but that's obviously a common theme in today's college basketball world.
Yeah, and it's a little bit difficult, I think, or it will be difficult for him to recruit like the elite talent with the style of play that he has. They played the slowest pace in the entire country, so it's not really an appealing brand of basketball to
Yeah.
enhance your ability to be potentially a first round draft pick. But obviously, I mean, winning should mean everything to these guys, and obviously money is a big factor. But overall, he's a fantastic coach, and anybody should want to play for him.
Yeah. So, moving to the SEC now, as we mentioned, Sean Miller leaving Xavier for Texas. Rodney Terry out there after his kind of like Elite Eight run, I guess, with Chris Beard's team a couple years ago. Now Sean Miller taking over there. He's had, I'd say, a solid offseason so far. They addressed some needs in the front court. Bringing in Traore and Voikatitis from FAU. I think he's a good coach. I do have some concerns about his ability to recruit here, at least, to the profile of school and the NIL budget that Texas has. Will he be able to recruit the top level talent? Um, you know, because it's not like when he was able to recruit DeAndre Ayton to Arizona and wire him $100,000 and nobody else or other teams were doing it, but it was much less common. Now everyone's a player, right? And so is Sean Miller going to be able to attract that sort of talent to Texas? And that's kind of where my hesitation is with him.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he can. I mean, they have to have what, a top 20 to 25 NIL budget. I don't know what the budgets are for these schools. They're not like
I
nobody
think
really.
Texas is one of whatever the 10 schools with like the $10 million budget or something.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it looks like he's trying to build a little more of like his defensive brand. That's kind of what he was known for at Arizona. I mean, they always had some of the top defenses in the country, and it was always their offensive like ceiling that was a little bit limited. At Xavier, he kind of flipped the script, went a little more guard heavy, a little more offense driven, and it did affect their defense. It affected their front court defense, obviously. I mean, he dealt with some injuries last year, especially before the season when Lassina Traore went down. But he's going to be with him at Texas. So I do think he has built a little bit more of a defensive brand, with that front court of like Camden Heide, Dalen Swain, obviously coming with him from Xavier, Voigtaitis as the rim protector, and like I said, Traore, and then being able to retain Weaver, Mark, and Pope. Pope's not really a defender, but Weaver and Mark, I think, are definitely his style of like two-way, more defense-driven guards. So I do think you're going to get fairly close to what those Arizona teams looked like, and I think the ceiling's a little bit higher for him at Texas, obviously, with the budget and adding more talent as opposed to
Yeah.
when he was at Xavier.
Yeah, no, I agree. Next school back to the ACC, Duke assistant Jai Lucas going down to Miami. Most notably, made that move with Shelton Henderson, decommitting 5-star, committed to Duke, decommits from Duke, commits to Miami. He's had a pretty loud offseason, I would say. Like Miami was the cellar dweller of Division I power conference basketball. Not even power conference. Like they were bad. They lost to some pretty bad teams this year at home. So he's obviously trying to get them back to what Larinaga had them at a few years ago. He's brought in some good pieces, I think. Now it's just a matter of like fitting them all together. But I think I like what he's done there so far. And I kind of like where they're trending, being a Duke guy. I think he's got the ability to recruit some solid names down there.
For sure. Yeah, he definitely has shown that he knows how to recruit already, stealing Shelton Henderson from Duke and then accumulating guys that have, they're known across college basketball at the power conference level. They have a reputation of being good at that level, like Trey Donaldson, Malik Renew. Uday was solid his last couple of years at TCU. I don't really love any of those transfers like individually, but I mean, obviously they have a ton of talent, and he's clearly shown that he knows how to recruit. We just don't really know how great he's going to be as a head coach. These Duke Coach K like disciples haven't really been the greatest. I mean, I don't really. What's like the best assistant coach? I guess Capel. Yeah, I mean he's been solid, not great, but yeah, it just kind of remains to be seen how great of a coach he really is. We won't really know until we see it on whenever they start their first game, November 4th or 5th. But yeah, he's clearly shown he knows how to recruit.
Yeah. Now going up to Indiana, this was one, we knew was coming pretty much from the beginning of the season. Mike Woodson really struggled out the gate, put them in a position to make the tournament, but ultimately was let go at the end of the year. And here they have Darian DeVries, who has made quite a jump himself over the last couple of years, now ending up at one of the, once premier college basketball programs at Indiana. So now it's just a question of, can he bring Indiana back to what they used to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think he can at least get pretty close, and I think he's one of the most underrated coaches in the country. He's another guy he's won everywhere he's gone. I think he made the tournament 3 or 4 times at Drake. Probably should have made the tournament this year at West Virginia, but I mean, he's done a really good job in the portal with. I mean, they obviously have a really good budget, but I think he's got some value guys they didn't really have to spend that much money on. You know, guys like Tate and Connerway and Lamar Wilkerson at the guard spot that I absolutely love. I think they're two of the better or more underrated transfers in this entire portal. And obviously he brings his son Tucker along with him for, you know, he's getting that redshirt year from missing that time from his shoulder injury. You know, they have a ton of depth on this roster as well. You know, guys on the wing like Josiah Miles. He's getting Connor Enright, who played for him at Drake, Jason Drake at Drexel from Drexel as well. And he likes to build his rosters around, you know, having two-way, you know, 3-and-D pieces, and then having, you know, the guard creation with guys like DeVries and Connerway that can create some open looks for those shooters. So I think he's done a really good job roster construction wise, optimizing everything there. So yeah, I mean, this is probably the second best hire, I think, right behind Ben McCollum.
Yeah, no, I mean I think this is a great hire. I think it's showing great investment, you know, from a great investment and belief from Indiana in DeVries and his ability to win and kind of build a winning culture, as he's shown at you know several places now. You know, but I guess we'll see. You know, he's got the backing there at Indiana. That group of alums definitely wants to see Indiana basketball get back to being relevant, nationally relevant, not just like Big Ten relevant. You know, they've been obviously in the middle of the pack in the Big Ten for the last several years. So, you know, it remains to be seen. But next one, kind of a surprising move. This is probably the most surprising coaching change of the offseason to me. Buzz Williams leaving Texas A&M to go up to Maryland. You know, obviously after Kevin Willard left for Villanova, which we'll talk about here in a minute as well. This one was, to me, a little bit confusing. I didn't really know why he made this move. You know, he's from Texas. You know, Texas A&M obviously has a pretty substantial budget, but made the move nonetheless. And he's made a few moves here in the portal. He's brought some guys with him, like Solomon Washington, Payne, but he's also, you know, lost some guys. Obviously, Gillespie and Rodney Rice both left. You know, Queen left for the draft, of course. That whole starting five is gone. So going to be a much different Maryland team. But obviously he's trying to basically build what he had at Texas A&M in terms of style of play.
Yeah, and I guess he's kind of been known to jump ship from program to program every 4 or 5 years, and it kind of started when he was at Marquette, right? He went from Marquette, was there for 4 years, I believe, then went to Virginia Tech, elevated their program, and then jump ship to Texas A&M, elevated that program, and then kind of jump ship to Maryland. But I mean, they're coming off of a Sweet 16 performance led by Willard and the Crab Five. So I don't really understand it either. It doesn't really make a ton of sense, but the fact that he has a reputation for, you know, kind of jumping ship and almost kind of getting bored at a certain school, I think it kind of makes sense for that reason. But yeah, just for roster construction purposes, he obviously brought a couple of guys with him, like you said, and the backcourt is kind of looks similar, you know, and it's an athletic backcourt, but an inefficient backcourt. You know, we like to talk about that a little bit on here. Just like, obviously, Buzz Williams loves to win the extras, and the shot making doesn't really matter a ton. But I don't really think he's done a great job trying to really fix that area of you know, shot making or perimeter shot making at that. So they're going to have a high floor. They have an athletic defense. They're going to get on the offensive glass, which is going to create that high floor. But the ceiling, I'm just not really sure is there. And that's kind of been the problem throughout Buzz Williams' coaching career.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they'll they'll probably be down, obviously, compared to what they had this year. They were super deep, or not super deep, but super talented at the top this year. So it'll be a little bit different, but I think Buzz within a couple of years will have Maryland, you know, very similar to how they were at Texas A&M. You know, he's a good coach, obviously, just doesn't like to stick around very long. So um, next coach, former Maryland coach, as we just talked about, jumped to Villanova, a little bit closer to home for him. I think this was probably part of it. I think that's what I had read about. You know, it's a little bit closer to family. You know, didn't feel the support at Maryland, as kind of he deflected a bunch throughout the season in interviews. But now up at Villanova, you know, trying to get them back to what they were under Jay Wright. You know, he's made comments about wanting to keep the culture that Jay Wright has built there. Kyle Neptune obviously wasn't super successful. And you know, Willard's trying to get them back.
Yeah, and I think this is the job that Kevin Willard always wanted. You know, it didn't really end the greatest for him at Maryland. I mean, outside of the Sweet 16 appearance, I think the Maryland fan base kind of drove him out. So I guess it was ended up kind of being a win for both sides. You know, he got the job that he's pretty much always wanted. But I mean, from a roster construction standpoint, I don't really think he's done a great job so far. You know, bringing in guys like, I mean, he got the 4-star Caden Lewis at the guard position. They brought in guys like Bryce Lindsey, Duke Brennan from Grand Canyon. Then Zion Stanford and Devin Askew are just kind of inefficient kind of shot chuckers. And I'm just not really sold on what he's done so far through the portal. And Willard's always been known as kind of like a floor raiser, kind of similar to Buzz Williams. I guess they just do it in different ways. They're floor raisers with not so high ceilings, but the roster that he had at Maryland last year was obviously elite, and credit him for building that roster. But I think he was kind of the beneficiary of having that elite roster. I'm not really sure if his coaching style can really elevate like a ceiling, and I don't really think this roster really has that right now. So I don't really expect a great year from Villanova at this point in time with their roster, but I can see him potentially making a push for the NCAA tournament, but I could easily see them being on the outside this season.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, I don't really understand how Devin Askew is even still getting Division I offers, but that's not even worth the time. But anyway, moving on. In the SEC now, Texas A&M brought Bucky McMillan over from Samford. You know, I was surprised that A&M, with the money that they seemingly like to spend, as we saw them do in like football with Jimbo Fisher, basically going and just throwing a bag of cash at some top tier coach, or top tier name, I should say, which is kind of what they have traditionally liked to do. I was surprised they made this move, but you know, I think he's had a pretty good offseason so far, all things considered.
Yeah, I think this hire kind of came down to like maintaining the brand that Buzz Williams brought. You know, it's kind of a scrappy style. It's a unique style, that's for sure. It's they're gonna get up and down. They're probably gonna play at the number 1 or 2 pace in the entire country. He's always done that. While at Stanford, they're gonna press. They're gonna get up and down. They're gonna try to get all over the offensive glass and attempt to turn you over by pressing and, you know, kind of denying the rim, trying to optimize their turnover differential. And he has the roster build that he sort of had at Stanford. They have like, it's smaller guards that are super feisty, handle the ball extremely well. And it's just, and I guess he's done a pretty good job with the budget that he's had, which isn't like a small budget, obviously, but it's not obviously not the biggest in the entire country. He got Mbako from Indiana. Hopefully he can kind of, you know, turn his career around a bit. He hasn't really shot it well throughout his career, but overall, I thought that was a good get. And getting Federico from Texas Tech, I thought was another good get. But I mean, at the very least, with McMillan, you're going to see a really fun brand of basketball. I think that'll at least keep the fans entertained. I'm just not sure how great he's going to be in year one. I don't love the guards like in a vacuum, but I think they fit the mold, but
yeah.
just not sure how well they're going to be able to translate the SEC basketball in general. But overall, they're going to be really fun to watch.
And Rylan Griffin should have the green light to maybe get some confidence back. He had a rough year at Kansas, so maybe he'll have the opportunity here to chuck and light it up like he did against UNC in the tournament a couple of years ago. Who knows? I mean, he's got the talent. He had a really rough year, obviously, at Kansas, though.
Yeah. Definitely a few guys on this roster that you're kind of taking swings on, but I mean, they were known as more high profile guys coming in, like Griffin and Mbako. And I mean, if they can hit shots at a 40% clip from three, I think this team kind of has a fairly high ceiling.
Yeah. Next coach, Ross Hodge at West Virginia, made the move from North Texas, obviously replacing Darian DeVries here after just one season. I like the hire here too. He's had success at North Texas. So I think that this is a good move for them.
Yeah, Grant McCaslin, disciple there. He was an assistant for, I believe, 4 or 5 years while McCaslin was there, and he's a fantastic coach. Obviously, a defensive-minded coach. They always had one of the top defenses in the entire country, even at North Texas. They were like the wing defenders that he likes to have, and brought in this season, and like Jasper Floyd, Brennan Lorient are fantastic perimeter defenders, and they're gonna bring that same defensive identity here to West Virginia. Hopefully, he can bring in a little bit more scoring talent. He brought in Honor Huff from Chattanooga, who he shot at 42% on extremely high volume. He's a really fun guard to watch, and yeah, I think that's really and Trayson Eaglestaff as well, who can light it up. I'm a little bit skeptical with how his game will translate, but overall, if he can just bring in some more offensive talent, I think they'll be able to compete in year one. But it's obviously going to be a little bit tougher when you don't have that top tier talent in the Big 12. But overall, it's a great hire.
Yeah, no, I agree. Next one, we've got Ryan Odom. Of course, we've seen him have plenty of success. He was the coach at UMBC several years ago now as the first 16 to upset a 1. Most recently, just made the tournament with VCU, now going over to Virginia. And he's made a few moves. He's got the ability, it sounds like now, to make a big splash and get Desmond Claude. Sounds like Desmond Claude's maybe down to just 2 schools now, maybe Kansas and Virginia. So we'll see if any other players come into the picture there. But if he could land him in his first season in a Power 5, that would be a big time get, especially for making them more competitive for this season. He got Dallin Hall coming over from BYU. He's made a couple other moves as well, bolstered the front court a little bit. Obviously they lost everything, but it's not like Virginia was a very good team to begin with, right? So I think Ryan Odom, he's one of my favorite coaches in the country. I hope he can bring success here to Virginia and maybe change the way that they play a little bit. I mean, it's not going to be ground and pound 45-point games, I don't think, with Ryan Odom at the helm.
No, it's going to be different. It's going to be a defensive brand, but they're going to do it in slightly different ways. It's not, muck the game up and completely slow it down. It's going to be, I mean, his teams like to press a ton as well. And he likes to have, lankier defenders across the board. And, he's accomplished that fairly well. I think he's got some system fits on this roster. I don't really love the overall talent on this roster overall, but for a long-term hire, I do really like it. But there are just some guys on this roster I don't really love all that much, but it's definitely a good reset to, kind of change the brand of Virginia basketball. And I honestly, I wasn't really aware that they had a little more NIL than, to be able to go grab Desmond Claude potentially. I don't know what the final number is going to be on that. I believe you said he was searching for what, 4 million, 3.5, 4 million. I don't know if that's going to be the final price if he's going to end up at Virginia. Maybe it's 2.5 to 3, but yeah, I just didn't. I wasn't really aware of their NIL budget.
Yeah, no, but if they do have one, that's good news for Odom moving forward anyway. Because I do think like he's shown success. I think players like playing for him. At least that's the way it seemed. So, we'll see what he's able to do there. Next one, want to give a quick shout here to this one. Nico Medved moving from Colorado State up to Minnesota. He hasn't really done a ton in the portal. Brought a couple guys with him, I think. But they've also lost quite a bit at Minnesota. And I know Dawson Garcia is hoping for his 5th year. He's in the portal though. My guess would be if the NCAA passes that waiver, he's not going back there. So I don't really expect much out of Minnesota. Definitely not this year, but I do like Medved as a coach. We'll have to see what he's able to recruit there. But I wouldn't say it's going to be an easy job.
No, especially this year, it's going to be a little bit tough for him. He doesn't have the NIL budget that everyone else in the Big Ten has, but I do like this as a long-term hire, and he's been able to generate NBA draft prospects. He had a first rounder in David Roddy, maybe a potential first rounder in Nate Clifford. I'm not really sure where he's at on boards, but I mean, he's going to be playing in the NBA next year. And then obviously Isaiah Stevens from 2 years ago. So he clearly knows how to develop talent. And I think his eye for talent is pretty damn good. And hopefully he's able to grab some guys, some value guys that he can get for a little less money that bigger schools aren't really looking at. And, he can kind of build this program that way, maybe sneak into the tournament once in the next 2 or 3 years, and maybe he can get the ball rolling there because this is the job that he's always wanted. So,
yeah. We also have Cody, your favorite team from the tournament this year, the Tritons. Yeah. Their coach made the move to New Mexico. Eric Olin, obviously going to be a tough job there this year, I think, with the talent they lost. True Washington, of course, leaving, as well as why am I drawing a blank?
Dent.
Donovan Dent, yeah, of course. So losing their guard presence, Nelly Jr. Joseph's gone up front. It's going to be a bit of a challenge, I think, this year for him at New Mexico. But another coach that I think that, obviously getting them into the tournament at UC San Diego, huge accomplishment. And I think he's going to be able to bring success to New Mexico. And honestly, I actually don't know how long he's going to be there, because I could see him being a guy that, if they have some success, he's gone to it, a Power 5 pretty quick.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I see it. Honestly, I think, he's one of the best coaches in the entire country, and I think everyone's going to see that this coming season. He hasn't done a bad job in the portal so far. He grabbed Dayton Albury from Utah State in conference. That's a really good pickup, especially in year one. He brought Chris Howell with him, who's a good defender, great system fit. Obviously, Kevin Patton Jr. from USC, who's a really good athlete, and he fits the defensive mold as well. And Olin's, he's always going to be a floor raiser with the defensive identity. It just kind of comes down to how good this offense can be with currently the lack of shooting that they have. But I think the floor is going to be super high. He's going to be able to be in the top half of the Mountain West at the very least, and that's going to give him a chance to get into the tournament in year one, and potentially, hopefully he doesn't leave New Mexico right away, because it's still a really, really good program, and maybe he'll hold out for a higher up job. So yeah, I love the hire. Obviously, this was one of my favorite teams at UC San Diego last season, and I expect them to be great again.
Yeah. And the last one we're going to talk about, this one more just a quick shout. Phil Martelli Jr. Made the move from a Bryant assistant coach. Bryant, of course, making the tournament this year, to now replacing Ryan Odom at VCU as the head coach. Martelli Jr., of course, the son of legendary Phil Martelli, who was at St. Joseph's for forever, from 95 to 2019. Then he spent a few years at Michigan as their assistant head coach, I guess, and then stepped in as their head coach uh, when Juwan Howard was out suspended and when he got fired, right? So, um, obviously like family blood here um, is good in basketball, but I don't really know what to expect from him here, but obviously a name worthy of mentioning.
Yeah, I mean, he flipped that Bryant program around pretty quick. Obviously, they were pretty good under Grasso in that one year, and then kind of the wheels kind of fell off with him, and he slid in and did a great job, kind of completely changed the way that they played, and he's actually done a pretty good job in the portal so far as well. For a coach that's coming from Bryant and moving up into probably the best job in the A10 outside of Dayton. He's brought in LSU transfer Tyrell Ward, Bam Tracy from Oregon. They brought Barry Evans with him as well, who's a really good pickup. So, and also a UConn transfer, Ahmad Noel, who's has some upside at the guard spot. So he's done a pretty good job in the portal, gaining some traction there in year one, and hopefully they can get the ball rolling there and at least finish, top 3 or 4 in the A10.
Yeah, no, I think so, and I hope that he's able to build something there, like his dad was able to build at St. Joseph's. But obviously, like you don't see coaches sticking around at places as long anymore. It's just a stepping stool to their next job. But we'll see what happens. Of course, a lot of coaching changes this offseason to wrap things up here. A lot more than what we've talked about today. These were kind of the more prominent ones, the Power Five ones, and then a few of the bigger mid-major conferences and some of the changes there. So we're going to dive more into a lot of this stuff throughout the offseason as we discussed at the beginning. Starting to get into transfers probably in the next episode a little bit more, some of the bigger transfers, but wanted to provide some updates on the coaching carousel because it is wild these days with how quickly coaches are jumping, the money that's being thrown at them, just like at the players. So, the beginning of an exciting offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably only going to get crazier throughout the years until there are some regulations on that, obviously. But it definitely creates some entertainment, whether it's a good or a bad thing. And obviously, we're going to be here to cover it.
Yeah. So, with that wraps up our first off-season podcast episode. We'll see you next time as we discuss some of the bigger transfer news.